Join us live every Tuesday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on GluFM for Minding Your Business with me, Attorney Rishma Eckert, to discuss the law and your business. Email us with your questions at info@mybshow.com. And remember, success comes from minding your business. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Minding Your Business. I am your host, Rishma Eckert. I am a business law attorney with Eckert Law, PLLC. And today we're doing one of my favorite segments, the Small Business Spotlight. And we have with us Arya Lightfoot, who runs a podcast called Twocan View. But we're going to get into that very, very shortly and speak with our special guests as well. So before we get into that, as usual, a little house cleaning stuff. Please go ahead and follow us on Facebook. Our page is at MYB Radio Show. Go ahead and follow our page where you can see our promotional flyers. I usually put additional information about our guest speakers and additional resources for small businesses as well. We have a feature called MYB Small Business Spotlight, which is what we're doing today. We try to do them every month or so, and it is for you guys, our listeners, to be able to get information from small business owners basically around the world. We've done a lot of US, and we're working on getting some international as well. And there's a way for you to feature your products or your services. And as Mark mentioned, we're in Florida, New York, Kentucky, Canada, parts of Asia, parts of Africa, Jamaica. I don't think I'm missing anything. So this is a great platform for you to be able to talk about your goods and services.
East Africa.
And we also want to make sure that we highlight those businesses who may have taken a hit during the pandemic. We want to give you a platform to go ahead and get your word out there. We also have a segment called Ask MYB, where you, our listeners, can go ahead and email me and email the show and let us know what you want to know. This is a show for business law, business resources. So if there is something that I have not covered or something that I covered but you would like for me to elaborate on, I would love to make a show about it. And actually I have in the past. We've had questions and I've turned it into an entire show. So it's good to have that feedback from you guys and let me know what I can make my show about. So before we get into our guests, my quote of the week, and I absolutely love this one. It's from Diana Hardy. She's an international best-selling novelist. And she says, "It only takes one voice at the right pitch to start an avalanche." And the reason that becomes important today is because we're speaking to a very special guest who has something that is that one voice at one pitch. Because sometimes it just takes that one person to highlight certain issues for that avalanche to start rolling and hopefully for change to be made. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you guys to my special guest, Arya Lightfoot. Hi, Arya.
Hi, Rishma. How are you doing?
I'm very, very well. So Arya will tell you a little bit more about herself and her podcast, but I definitely wanted to make sure that we have different types of businesses and industries and interests on this show. We've covered so many small business spotlights where we talked about consultants, we have restaurant owners, we have mental health counselors, and we seem to do a lot of different types of industries, goods as well, when we had the elixirs. And I just wanted to make sure that I can get as many different types of industries and business endeavors. That way, hopefully that sparks some sort of, help for the people who are listening, inspiration, whatever you may want to take from it. So I was very excited to have someone who is doing sort of opinion pieces and podcasts and of such. So Arya, please go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, Rishma and listeners. Thank you for the invite. My name is Arya Lightfoot. I live in Florida. I'm actually a licensed realtor in Florida and work within the investment environment. I'm also a Belizean from the diaspora, or I'm a Belizean living in the diaspora. Mm-hmm. And as you know, we always have a lot of different issues within Belize that affects the economy. And so I started a podcast about 3 years ago in December. And really, it was revolving around politics and corruption and how it affects our environment and stuff like that. So,
Very, very good. And can you tell us a little bit about her podcast? Is called Twocan View, and that's Twocan. And I bet that's a play on the toucan bird, right? That's our
actually,
national
it
bird.
is.
Yeah,
It
right.
is.
I
Yeah.
figured it was a play on the toucan, which is the national bird of Belize. So it's Twocan View. How did you come up with that name? And other than it being a play on our national bird, why did you want to start a podcast to talk about issues affecting Belize? Was there a specific event that had happened, or you just thought, well, this is the time? What was your purpose of starting?
Well, actually, I have a blog that I've run for 10 years, and it was really a suggestion by my husband. And he said, hey, everybody's podcasting. You know, a lot of people don't read, but a lot of people tend to listen. So why don't you start a podcast? And so I did a little bit of research on how to start a podcast. And I started my podcast right around the anniversary of when I started my blog, probably 8 years, 7 years into my blog, I started the podcast.
Okay, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. So let's go back 10 years then for the blog, because that was going to be one of my questions. Why a podcast and not necessarily like a YouTube channel or a vlog or a blog? But let's go back 10 years. Was there something specific that made you think, you know what, I want to get my voice out there. I want to be that voice that starts that avalanche that we talked about. Was there a specific thing that made you start, or were you just thinking, you know what, I have a lot to say and I really want to put it out there?
Well, really, it started with me and another person who kind of was like, we used to discuss issues online within the social media network, and me and her decided, well, let's start a blog. Because a lot of arguments sometimes it devolves, and so you want to have the discussion from a research point of view, and also invite other people also to like people who are experts within certain fields to come in and give an opinion piece also. And at the time it was two of us doing it, therefore the two can view.
Oh, got it. So there's another
Yeah,
meaning. I didn't know that part either.
yeah,
Right, right.
right.
So you would take opposite sides and sort of argue an issue.
Well, not necessarily argue it, but sometimes she would have tackled certain issues. Her degree at the time was psychology.
Okay,
And then my one is public administration at
that's
that
right.
time. So I would try to discuss issues from this is really the right way we ought to do things, and take it from, tackle an issue and take it from that perspective.
I
Within
see.
the many years politically, you know, Belize kind of very volatile, sometimes very
Mm-hmm.
with politics. So of course, if you're discussing politics, it's always they're being accused of being belonging or promoting one party versus the next, and government change. So it's the same rhetoric coming. But one of the things I kind of, and I did run a little business with Toucan View too, by the way. I did
Okay.
some shipping. I did shipping in Belize with it, and kind of help facilitate people with getting information, getting stuff to Belize. Um, so I did that for a while. But what I realized since doing the blog, that I want to focus more on educational things where people can use the information to uplift themselves. So I think I mentioned to you, I'm starting an MBA this year with
Mm-hmm.
Florida State University,
That's
just to
right.
get more into the business aspects, because really money runs the world, and
Right.
you know that.
That's
And
right.
even money runs politics, and money runs just about everything. So it would be very good to get a more like a better view of the environment, and maybe offer more educational rather than opinion pieces and
That's
bring
right.
people in. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that would go to one of my other questions that I had for later on, but let's just get into it now. I have my bullet points of questions, and one of the things I wanted to ask you was, where do you see it escalating to? What would be sort of your end goal of what you wanted to have with starting off with, well, now I see it was a blog, now a podcast. What would be the end goal?
Well, ultimately, my dream would be to do a media, completely go into media.
Okay.
And that would not be anything anytime soon. But certain things that I do want to offer people information on is real estate. I'm a licensed realtor in Florida, and I work within the investment environment, and offer people financial literacy. I think that's extremely important. That's why I
Hmm.
actually love what you're doing.
Thank you.
And then and then bring in
My
other people who,
my
sorry.
first, no, I was going to say my first guest to actually compliment the show. Thank you
I
very
know,
much.
right?
I saw your face, Mark. Yeah, our first guest to actually compliment the show. But yes, go ahead, Aria.
Yeah, and then so financial literacy, and then kind of push the idea of small businesses,
Hmm.
because small businesses have a tendency to empower people where they become less dependent on the system, and they learn how to earn money themselves. So of course I work, like I said, with a bunch of investors. I've learned a lot from that environment in the sense of how they think, how they do a lot of evaluations
Hmm.
with properties and stuff like that, things you would not even think about.
Hmm.
And I think within the Caribbean community and within the different communities, and if you actually do a research on most billionaires in the world, you'll find out that real estate is a big part of their portfolio.
That's right.
So those are some of my thoughts about how I can improve upon the blog and how I could offer more services educationally rather than opinions type stuff.
Got you. So it's an evolution, and I want our listeners to know out there that just because you start with one thing doesn't mean that you have to stick to that thing. So even with this show, as you mentioned, with minding your business, we started off being very informational. It was okay. How do we set up? How do we trademark? How do we copyright? How do we do all these things? And then we saw the need to highlight certain businesses, and we came up with the different features of the show, like as MYB and the spotlights and stuff like that. So you can evolve having your same goal in mind, but still making sure that you stick to your purpose. And I love that informational aspect of it, because one of the things we talked about in the show in the past, Aria, is that there is such a information educational gap with our communities. Especially I see it here in South Florida because I do it as a business. I practice
Right.
business law, so I see it where you can have this great product, you have this great idea, great service that you do, but you just don't know how to make that transition into really monetizing that passion and making a business structure out of it. And there was such that educational gap that when we had the opportunity to do the show, I jumped on it because I thought this is my little way, my little contribution to make sure that some information is out there. And even if you don't know where to begin, at least you can sort of watch a video and say, okay, I have an idea of the next step that I want to make. So I think that we're very similar minded when it comes to that and trying to fill that education gap within our communities. Um, and I think that's great. And you're right, real estate is always a huge part of just generational wealth. You see it, it's
Yeah.
always real estate, it's always land, it's always property, it's always mansions, even if it's developing properties or rental homes or whatever the case may be. Property is always involved in some kind of
And
capacity.
and one of the things you notice in Belize, it's I met this young man who told me, Aria, there's no more land. Everybody owns the land. And I told him, I want you to drive from Corozal to PG one day. And when you're finished driving, you tell me what you see mostly driving.
Mm-hmm.
You see land.
That's right.
And like people don't see land that you could trade it, you could develop it. It's a product that it doesn't matter that somebody has it in their ownership. The fact is that you could negotiate with someone, you could purchase it. There's a lot of ways that you could develop real estate. And I think sometimes we are taught to think within a certain line.
Mm-hmm.
We're within that black and white line, that we don't consider things outside the box. And I think the ones who become very successful versus the one who do not, it's all about how you think about things and how you, like you said, how you learn about the business environment, or how you structure your businesses, and what you're willing to do, what you're willing to risk, because business is also part of taking risks.
That's right.
My investors will argue, because it's funny that we always talk politics with taxes, and he would argue that, hey, business people create employment, so they really shouldn't be paying all these taxes that they want us to pay, because they're taking the majority of the risk. Um, and so we go back and forth on that, but it's something I guess you could comment on as a business attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And the way taxes are even structured. Like a lot of us think about income tax, but some of these businesses, they don't earn income per se.
No, it's the corporate taxes.
Right, right. So it's interesting. It's a lot of interesting things that are out there, like I said, that I'm very interested in learning about. And that's why I decided, and my MBA will do a focus on real estate. That's where I'm actually focusing as a specialty at Florida State.
That's amazing. And I want to just point out too, and one of our previous shows, we talked about the importance of educating yourself. And I gave a couple of examples of, I'll get clients that call in and they absolutely don't know anything about what I'm talking about, but they open their listening ears, as I tell my toddlers, open your listening ears, and they listen to what I have to say. They listen to the when I explain things, and they seem to get it, understand it, want to process it, and want to understand it. Then I have clients who absolutely don't even care about anything that I want to say and tell me, well, you just decide for me, as if I'm the business owner. And I tell them I can't do that. You need to understand, process, and tell me what you want me to do. And it's so important. And I love the fact that you're going after an MBA with a concentration in real estate, because you know that that's what you want to end up doing. And I want to say to my listeners out there that if you're in that business, you want to develop a business for yourself, and you know that you have a deficiency somewhere where maybe, I need to take a class on QuickBooks, or I need to take a class on something else to help me be better at my business, even though you are not going to probably be the attorney of the company or the accountant of the company or whatnot. You still have to have some sort of understanding as a business owner of what's happening within your business. So we talk a lot on this show about make sure you do your research, educate yourself, because that's really the only way that you're going to be able to run your business. It's good to have people that you trust to do it. And my clients absolutely will trust me to do what I need to do for their businesses. But it's from a place of understanding your options and making that decision for themselves. So I love the fact that you are going to go after the thing that you want to get done, and you realize that you need that business acumen. So now you're going after an MBA, and that's very admirable. Not many business owners or prospective business owners do that. I wanted to touch on a little bit of the land thing that you mentioned, because I remembered something that one of my US friends told me when back a few months ago, probably half a year ago, when that land issue was happening in Belize. I can't remember the name of the gentleman, and I don't want to bring up his name, but there was an issue with land ownership in Belize. And I was showing some of my US friends, and they go, well, why is this such an issue? I don't understand why land is such an issue. And I'm sort of straddling that, Belizean and US type laws here, or the way that the systems work in different countries. In Belize, we don't have a credit system in which you can go show your credit score, get a loan or whatnot. So I have to explain to this US individual that land is power, land is money. You can use land as collateral to go get a loan, to start a business, to buy something else. So the reason that land becomes so important in developing countries is because you use it as currency. And maybe that's not the same. It is the same, but not the same in like the US and other first world countries, because you also have other things that you look at to be able to get loans, to start businesses and whatnot. But in countries where we don't have credit scoring systems, land becomes the most important thing. So I had to explain to this US person that this is why it's important. It's for your future. It's for you to be able to continue for the rest of your life. And even if you don't develop that land to be your home or your homestead, you can still use it as collateral to get more money and to continue making money. So that's where you see the huge difference between our understanding of the importance of land in developing countries versus in the US. So my
One
little
of the things, one of the things
tangential
I want
thing.
to mention also specifically in Belize, a lot of people hold land and the land is not doing anything for some people, like people who hold large tracts of land. For example, here in the US, the laws frown upon just holding land, and they discourage it because they call it land waste. For
Mhm.
example, they in Belize, and I told this a friend one time, she owned a prime piece of property in Placencia or one of those tourist areas,
Mhm.
and they only visited the property once a year during Easter. So I asked her, so what are you doing at the property for the rest of the year? So it's just sitting there. And I think that is how you would find first world countries are different because, as you said, land is currency and it's they don't allow it to sit. If I own a prime piece of property, I
You
will be
Airbnb
renting
it.
that.
Yep.
Right.
Say the same thing I'm thinking. I'm gonna
Right.
Airbnb that. It's that's such a tourist destination that you can get top dollar for it in Placencia. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is the difference. You talk about that mentality shift, the education. I mean, I'm not saying that we want to take people from the Caribbean or other diasporas and turn them into US minded people. Absolutely not. But it's a way for you to understand that your wealth doesn't have to just come from clocking in 9 to 5 at your regular job and then saving and paycheck to paycheck. You can make moves to do
Right.
other things as well, and that's a perfect example. You're absolutely right. I would be renting that, Airbnb in it for top dollar in Placencia for the time that she's not there. Hire a manager in Belize to come and do the set it up for when the guests arrive and sort of be the house manager in a way, and you can make top dollar for something like that.
And there was another example, and I suggested this to a young guy. He asked me to. He has a large tract of land, and he wanted to do. I don't know if you're following what Nigel is doing with
Mm,
the where
yeah,
they're splitting
yeah,
up land.
yes.
But I mean, years ago, I made that same suggestion to this guy. I told him, "You have 100 acres of land. You potentially have 80 lots. You need to raise money. What you should do is borrow so much from the banks and collateralize some of the lots. You don't want to collateralize your entire property."
Hmm.
Um, and it just sounded too complicated. Um, and then he decided, well, no, I have to get and I guess the process kind of moved slow too,
Yeah,
but it was about getting the individual titles and different stuff.
yeah.
But those are some of the barriers to doing business too, by the way, when it comes to land here versus
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. Everything is here systematic and online, and even title searches, it's pretty easy. I had to explain this to a potential client the other day. Like, if you're going to Belize, there's more than likely your file is a physical file in some drawer somewhere. It's not online. I mean, I think they're making moves towards computerizing certain departments. I would hope.
They
um,
are.
but that's going to help a lot with Belize. But I don't want to get too tangential. You mentioned the land thing, and I went into my own
Sorry
thoughts
about
as
that.
well. No, 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 that's me. That's me. I want to sort of talk more about the podcast and blogging, because the point is that listeners out there who are thinking, I have a lot to say, I want to do this as well. It's a way to sort of give them inspiration and maybe some resources. So let's go back to
Okay.
when you first started the blog, and also when you're doing the podcast. How did you know, for example, like with the podcast specifically, where to go to even get set up? Like, what system are you on? How do you have people find you and things of that nature? How did you even get started, and what is it that you researched to be able to pick what you actually picked?
So I did research different platforms, and the podcast movement is kind of big in even Belize have a podcast movement happening.
Mm-hmm.
I use Anchor, and the reason why is that they are free to start it for one,
Okay.
um, and they push out your podcast on platforms like Apple Podcasts. They push it out on Spotify and other podcast platforms. They have about seven of them. So once you post a show, it goes out to all these different shows, and they actually pay you because they give you the opportunity to create an anchor ad for them, and you include that ad within the show. And for every person that listens in, I can't remember what penny or 2 penny or 10 cents, I can't remember what it is,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but that's how they pay you to blog. So they actually pay you to podcast. So if you are lucky enough to pull out 1 million listeners, it's actually potentially a very profitable endeavor. You have to spend on advertising, of course, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to kind of work towards an audience. So
Right.
those would be some of the things that you would have to work on.
Yeah, Aria, can you please repeat the name of the source for your podcast?
It's Anchor,
Okay.
like the anchor for a boat.
Yeah, okay, no
Okay.
problem.
I haven't heard of it before. So no, this is good. This is kind of
Yes,
what
of
we
course.
want to,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah. We want to make sure that our listeners who are inspired to do the same, because I'm sure there are people out there who are thinking, I want to do this thing too. I just have no idea where to start. Um, One of the questions I wanted to ask you too with getting started is, what did you, two things. I'm going to start with, what did you think how did you face any challenges that you might have had in setting up your podcast? And then the second question is, what has the reception been from not just the diaspora, but within the US as well?
So some of the challenges initially was to create a subject matter for the podcast, speak within that subject matter, um,
Right? Same here.
try to limit your time, um, because even within listening, you want to kind of speak on a topic, but prepare before, research a little bit
Mm-hmm.
before, and speak on a specific topic. I have a tendency to bring on guests so that it's conversational
Mm-hmm.
on my show. And so initially asking questions kind of tough because sometimes you feel kind of flustered sometimes because you're looking at the clock and there's a clock that's going, and you want to make sure that you're staying also within your subject matter and that
Mm-hmm.
you're utilizing the guest's best time. So that comes a little bit with practicing. One of the things I tend to do sometimes, if it's only me, I will write a little summation of what I want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing with the podcast, it's my one, it's not live. I think
Good for you.
YouTube can be live.
Good for you.
Right. So you have the ability to edit it. They give you editing things to work with. They have now included where you could upload videos and you could actually upload other platforms. So I believe YouTube might be one of them where you could do a YouTube podcast and
Mm-hmm.
upload it into their platform, and their platform is going to shoot it out to all these different platforms. Um,
Uh,
but a lot of my listening is within the Belize market because it's really Belize centric.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely want to expand, like as I discussed before, outside that and start talking more real estate and start talking more business and small business entrepreneurship and politics within that framework.
Absolutely. That's great. Maybe we can collab on something. Now that I know
Definitely.
that's where
this
you're
this question
taking.
is actually for Rishma. Rishma, do you
Yes.
think podcast production should be copyrighted?
Yes, it's automatically copyrighted because it's your original work.
Okay.
So Aria is talking about, you do your hour of a research. It's sort of a research project, actually, because if you have your topic, you're researching, you're putting your thoughts together, it's your opinion. Once you have it out there, it's already automatically copyrighted through common law. Now, in terms of whether or not you're going to go and register it, it really depends on if Aria thinks that she has infringers out there who are going to try to, monetize on her words.
Yeah.
So it's an individual podcast host. They have to make that determination if they want to go ahead and register what they've done. You can register it in case someone infringes and starts, creating, I don't know, their own channel, and they take your words or they take your script or whatever the case may be. Then you have where you can go ahead and sue for infringement. But in terms of common law copyright, as long as she puts it out there and it's her original work, it's already automatically copyrighted.
Okay.
But that's a good question. That's a very good question.
I think now's the right time to drop a disclaimer, right?
Yes.
The content
please.
of Mind in Your Business is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific legal advice. This show discusses general legal issues affecting business owners. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily that of the show. If you need assistance with your specific legal issue, please consult with a licensed attorney. The
Absolutely.
content of Mind in Your Business is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific legal advice. This show discusses general legal issues affecting business owners. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily that of the show. If you need assistance with your specific legal issue, please consult with a licensed attorney.
It's very important.
Very important.
Yes.
Disclaimer alert. So when you get to the point where Aria's talking about you have 1 million people listening, I mean, even before I got to that point, when you're starting gaining popularity, I would probably put that into my mechanism of you do your research, you create your podcast, you go ahead and you just register it, because you can go on the site and you can register it on your own once you know what you're doing. So when you get to that sort of popularity where you're thinking, okay, someone may try to infringe, or you've had incidences in the past where someone's tried, I would probably make that a part of my ongoing business model when you make that transition into this is your business, complete business that you're doing.
I do want to add that the Anchor allows you to bring in your own advertisers too.
Okay.
So they don't limit you to only their ads. You could bring in your own advertisers, bring in people who might want to get a little spot into the show. It really allows you a lot of creativity within I have not played with it as much as I should with creating content for advertising. But I got one advertiser that said that he is interested in doing an advertising on the show. So yay.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Getting sponsors and ads is one of the hardest things when you take up some sort of airspace. I was also going to ask you, so how long do you think it takes you to prepare for a show? And I'm assuming you have the 1 hour slot. So how long does it take you to prepare for one show?
So this doesn't limit you to time. That's a good thing. But I normally try to keep the show at 1 hour 45 minutes. If it's only me, I try to do it between 15 and 30 minutes, because I figure after 15 minutes, nobody's listening to you talk to yourself. But
those are facts.
outside of so I do prepare, like if it's a subject matter that I think is very, very important, I will sit there and do some research on the media, do some research to find out if anybody else is discussing these issues, what some opinions are, and then kind of, let the guests know these are the subject matters that I will want to discuss before coming on to the show, so that they have at least an idea of what, so they're not scrambling looking for the answers. So yeah. Wow. So on average, it takes me, I would say, 1 hour, 2 hours pre-show. And because I normally discuss things within my expertise level, so I don't really veer outside politics and real estate much. politics, real estate. I will touch the law part when I'm talking about human rights and constitutional stuff. But those are really my circle that I kind of stay within.
Got you. And then with Anchor, is it that I guess it's whenever you want to put a show on, right? So it's not like you have to do it every week, every month. You're not really
No,
restricted.
no. And the good thing is you could do it on your phone. So whenever I'm talking to someone, it's like a phone call. And I think that creates almost a level of comfort that they're on their phone having a conversation, and it relaxes people sometimes and allows them to speak freely.
Right. And I agree with you there. I try to make everyone who comes on the show, I always tell them it's very informal, very conversational, because for me, the point is to, get to know the resources that you had, your struggles, your highs and your lows, as a point to inspire some of our listeners. And people do let down their guard when they know it's more informal and they speak freely. And I appreciate that. What would you say are some of your most memorable highlights that you've done so far? You said 3 years into the podcast and 10 years for blogging. Do you have any experiences, memorable moments that you would like to share?
I actually do. I enjoy talking to politicians because I love politics. So when I started my blog, I got the opportunity to, in one trip, I got the opportunity to interview Dean Barrow, who was the Prime Minister of Belize.
Okay.
And within that same trip, I met Said Musa at a restaurant. And then and people, to your listeners, these are Belize ex-prime ministers.
Yes, prime ministers of our country.
Yeah, and a couple more politicians I did meet on one trip. But within my podcast, I interviewed Honorable Karim Musa, who is now the Minister of Police, and I did interview the Prime Minister's son, which is my latest one, to talk about him because he's actually really into business. He isn't into politics. He isn't into law like the majority of the other people. So those were good shows, I think, and it allowed. And I did do. I did discuss some very controversial issues. Some of it can become very explicit because they allow you to be explicit. Some guests asked, "Is it okay for me to cuss when I'm talking?"
Yeah.
And I tell them I don't limit what they're saying. I give them that free rein to express themselves.
Wow, that's Anchor sounds. And by the way, I did listen to the last one that you mentioned, and it was very, very good because again, my focus is usually business and international business. So I found that particular interview to be very interesting. The one with Anwar was very interesting.
Yeah.
So it seems like that platform that you chose gives you free reign to pretty much do, any flexibility that you want in terms of your podcast. That's amazing. How many other programs did you look at before you decided on this one?
Honestly, what I did look at Apple Podcasts. I did look at Spotify, who does podcasts, that allows podcasts, but a lot of them host it. And really, the person who gave me the idea with Anchor was my husband, who dug deeper and told me, hey, check out this platform. This one allows you to push it out on all these different platforms. So that was the one I chose. And at least 2 people in Belize that are doing podcasting, well, one specifically, I gave him Anchor also so that he could use it as his platform to use. Yeah.
Well, the business attorney in me is dying to read the terms and conditions of the Anchor site.
You probably should tell me because I haven't read it.
That's the first thing I go to because I write T's and C's for websites and stuff like that, privacy policies, authorizations and stuff like that. So when I hear about these very, very free and flexible websites or resources out there, the first thing that comes to my mind is I got to read those terms and conditions because I can't imagine the waivers and the liabilities that's in there. But no, that's great. It gives you the flexibility, and it really is going to be the individual host taking the ownership out there. And again, I had never heard of Anchor, but it sounds pretty amazing. And this is not an ad for Anchor. I've never heard about it before, but it actually, if Anchor wants to sponsor my show, please go ahead and email me at info@mybshow.com. But no, it sounds pretty flexible.
Yes.
And it sounds like a great way to, even if you wanted to put out something once a month, or you have a full-time job and you don't really have the time to put a show together or something like that, and then sort of rev up as you see fit. It sounds like something that would work.
It's
for
funny.
you.
I have a station in Jamaica, Roots FM, Sugar Wayne Rockers Radio, and they listen right now. Now, is Anchor a provision for presenters in the Caribbean?
I think they allow Caribbean because this one guy in Belize, I'm sure that's a platform that he's using also. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it should be an issue for the rest of the Caribbean. I don't know specifically.
Okay.
But it allows people that are in Belize to download the app and to have the conversation so that I could actually do the podcast with them. So it should not be an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear because I think people think podcasts, look, I need a podcast room, I need a soundproof room, the mic, the whole setup. And yes, there's people out there who do that, but it doesn't seem like you're doing that, again, because, you have your job and all that, but you don't have to necessarily be set up that way and going to a lot of expenses to be able to start your podcast or your vlog or even your YouTube channel. So this is a great way for you to put your opinion out there and just do it. A lot of people think about, well, I have to make sure that I set up right and all that, and I have to make sure that I have all these expensive equipment. Sometimes it's not about that. It's just having a purpose and making sure that you put your purpose out there.
Well, my son, for Christmas, my son did buy me the microphone, the podcast microphone.
Okay. But you've been 3 years in, right? So you didn't wait to say, well, I need the full, tech setup of the best equipment, and then I'm going to get started. No, you wanted to go ahead and do your podcast, and you did it. So now you're upgrading because you've been in it for 3 years. You've been doing your podcast longer than I've been doing this show. Because, we're coming up to a year and you've been there.
I think you've done more shows, though. I think you've done...
Well, we do weekly shows. We do weekly shows,
Yeah, I normally address hot button issues rather than, when I do discuss it, it would be around a hot button issue.
Yeah, indeed. So my other question I have for you is, what is it that you wish you knew before you got started? And if you knew that thing, would you have done anything differently?
Now, that's a good question. What did I wish I knew before I started? I don't know. I feel like I thought about that question and I'm stumped at it right now. But it's a learning process, for sure. I think what I would have done differently would probably be structure it a little bit different. And maybe next year I'm going to focus on structuring it better than just doing hot button issues, and kind of come up with a seasonal series to speak on, at least once a month. Do it more of a timeline. And the other thing is, I probably would need to learn how to build the advertisement aspect of it. Like you said, it's difficult, but for me, I just have to. I hate hearing no sometimes. So going to ask somebody, hey, could you advertise and stuff? I probably would want to know. I probably would want to jump in if I had done it before. Jump in with an advertiser from the get-go, An
underwriting sponsor is usually how a lot of, I would say radio shows start, but it's with someone who's going to underwrite your show for a couple of months at least, right?
Right.
but for you, because you have so many things that you're going to be doing and diverse, you can still do Twocan View Politics, Twocan View Realty, Twocan View Financial,
Ah,
because
that's
yeah,
great idea. Thank
yeah,
you.
you can, because, and again, this is all part of my business planning that I do for my law firm. But you can, because it seems like you can still capitalize on having that brand name, which I love. And you can also just make sure that you hone in. So maybe Toucan View Politics can be a once a month thing or once a quarter or something like that. Because if you're looking for structure, and I thrive on structure. So whenever I want to, or whenever I want to address something, that would never work for me. What works for me is what we're doing with Mark and Lisa, which is every week at a specific time, you're going to
Right.
discuss something. Like that works for me because I'm able to put it into my setup on my calendar, and I check my emails and stuff like that and make sure I put my shows together. But that's something that you can consider, just having different branches of Toucan View, and
Actually, I love that. I
it can
love that
help you.
idea.
Yeah, it helps you structure a lot of like your thoughts, and you can mix and match, and you could probably still have your interviews, but you would then have to, for example, if you're doing Toucan View Financial, maybe the Anwar Barrow would be under there, or Toucan View Politics or whatever, then you'd have the Prime Minister. So you have a way to sort of put your structure together, because some sponsors, and this is, because we go after sponsors in this show as well, sometimes they don't want to be affiliated with the politicalness of it, but they don't mind getting behind the financial literacy part of it, right?
Right.
Or a real estate company might not really so much care about, again, the politics or the finances or whatever, but they want the realty part of it. So it's a good way
Right.
for you to be able to target different things for different shows, just FYI.
That's a great idea. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And we're connected. You have my number, I have yours. So if you ever want to
Yes,
call me, you can, and we can discuss that further. But
we will.
we we will. But I think that it's good to have a clear direction as well. And I see a lot of vlogs and blogs out there, and I think about it more because my 6-year-old keeps asking me for a YouTube channel, and I keep telling her no. And
No, let
as
her do it.
I spoke to my husband and I said, what is even going to be like what is it that she's going to cover? Because obviously you need a direction, you need a purpose, you need something, and not just talking. Because in my mind, I think very structured. So I need for it to be structured in a certain way. And
So,
maybe,
mom, can I say this, mom?
yes, let her just do
This is
whatever.
this is an artistic generation, and sometimes, yes, you need a structure where you could structure the time for her, and even if it's only 5, 10 minutes, you'd be surprised to know people want to hear what little kids have to say.
I'm telling
You
you,
know?
this child does videos on her tablet, stuff that I would probably never publish, but she does her own little channel by herself, and she makes her own videos. But that's neither here nor there. But because she is that young, though, 6 is to me very young, and I don't necessarily want to put her into that public eye as well, just saying whatever. But we'll think about it. I told her every time she asked me, I said, we'll think about it. Because I don't want to tell her no, because you're right. This generation is all about the YouTubers, the
Oh, yes.
influencers,
Yes.
the everyone wants something, to be in the spotlight, and she loves being in the spotlight. So we'll see. We'll see.
She could be the next Katie Curry that you're just correct, that you're just holding back.
I know, right? Me with my Caribbean mother leash, just holding her back from her dreams. No, but you're right. This new generation, and I see it even with my sister's generation, they're so creative. And
Yes.
what I love about it is that they have that mindset of, I don't want to necessarily work for someone, or at least not for the rest of my life, but I want my own. And I
Yes.
love that about them, is that I want my own. I want to make my own life, my own flexibility, my own wealth. And I admire it so much from the business law standpoint. So maybe I'll have my sister talk to my child. Maybe that's
Yes.
going to be a better influence than me. So let's just get back on track because we have about 6 more minutes. What recommendations would you give to our listeners out there, people who are thinking, you know, I have a voice, I want to do something, not my 6-year-old, just anyone else who's out there listening to it. What recommendations would you give about either starting a vlog or a vlog, or starting a podcast as well?
So I am big on people who have a voice because I think that, and just coming from that Caribbean background, you know, a lot of times we're told to shut up and listen. And I think this is the generation that wants to discuss issues, and we need to talk. The more we talk, the more we learn about each other. We learn from different perspectives. And you should check out these different platforms. There's many of them that are out there that offers you the opportunity to make money. You know, and if it's something you even do on the side, it's a little bit of money on the side. But if it's something that you love, I'm a big believer in pursuing happiness over money. I think if it's something that you really love, pursue it, and eventually the money will find you. So use your voice. Your voice is very important. If you write, I feel when you write, your voice is sealed into this world, this social media, this media history. And 100 years from today, somebody might listen to your voice or research your voice and find something that you said that impact them or impact somebody else's future. Somebody might be going through something that you can offer them advice. So I think go for it. If you want to do it, do it.
That's great. And I definitely agree with you on the point of it doesn't automatically have to start off with you being completely commercial, making tons of money. If you're in it for that reason, then don't do it. Basically, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to be as bold as to say that, because you're right. Money isn't everything. And if you want to go ahead and express yourself and you feel like you have a voice and something to say, then do it, not thinking necessarily in the very beginning about how much money can I make. You may eventually get to that point once you're building your business, but you know, don't do it. Any business out there, whether it's a podcast or you're starting a new LLC, if you think that, wow, I'm going to turn a millionaire in the first year of my business, that's very, very, very rare. Always pursue things with a passion. One of our mutual friends told me years ago, you know, find a way to monetize your passion. And I absolutely agree with them, because once you love doing something and their heart is and the soul is into it, then you are going to be okay with your choices in life. It's the people that I talk to, and I say this as a business law attorney, some businesses that I start and people come to me asking me how to open their business, they spent their whole lives, some of them have spent their whole lives doing other occupations that their heart was not into, something completely different from the thing that they want to do. And I feel happy and sad for them, happy that they're finally taking the step to make their own business for themselves. But part of me feels sad for them that you've spent almost your entire life doing something that you have no passion for, right? So it's always about doing things with passion. And just very, very finally, I'm going to ask you this because we have about 3 more minutes, but how do you deal with the backlash from, because I know you're very opinionated. So how do you deal with the backlash? And what advice would you give to our listeners who are shy about, well, what if someone doesn't like what I have to say? Or what if someone is going to be critical or it comes back to bite me? How do you deal with that? And what advice would you give?
So I don't remember who said it, but there's a saying that says, if you don't want to be criticized, remain silent. You'll never find any place that you're at. Everybody, there'll never be 100% that will agree. There'll never be 100% that will love you. There'll never be 100% ever. However, I find, unless you are somebody that's really close to me, a lot of people express opinions out of the moment. They're angry or whatever. But many times when you express these opinions, the good thing is they get to read it again and think about it, because that's what we want. We want people to think outside the box. And thinking outside the box creates discomfort. And when it creates discomfort, some people will lash out when they're faced with information that they don't necessarily want to hear. So I see it like that. I feel like it's educational. Um, it's a method that I put out a statement out there because I want people to comment on it and I want people to engage in it. And what it does, it brings in all different types of opinion, and then you learn the value eventually of, you might gain some people are great researchers. They might be throwing facts at you a thousand miles a minute, and then some people are, it's just pure emotion. So I think it's a great tool, to be honest.
I agree with you, and I see some of those some of the comments sometimes, and I think, what you're trying to do is have people, and they might not understand this, but what you're trying to do is have people have a discourse that's outside of emotion, outside of political affiliation, have a discourse on the actual issue. And
Right.
and a lot of countries, especially Belize and other developing countries, that's really hard to do because the people that you're talking about, right? It's hard to criticize your friend, cousin, uncle,
Right.
auntie, whatever. It's hard to do that sometimes, but raising the level of discourse is something that I agree with you that I would love to see in Belize. And I think that by you putting that information out there and demanding it in the way that you do gives people food for thought. And with
Thank
that
you.
said, I want you to go ahead and let people know how they can find your Twocan View podcast, and if you would like to share your socials as well, so that they can go ahead and follow you, or get in contact with you if they need to.
You should, because
So
I'm gonna follow you.
I know you will, Mark. I already do, so
so
you tell everyone else.
so you could find me on Twocan View. It's spelled TWOCANVIEW on Twitter. I'm also on Apple Podcasts or Anchor itself or Spotify, along with Podbean and a few others. I'm also on Facebook with Twocan View, and I run a subsidiary page called Belize Election Watch. And you could email me at toucanview@gmail.com. So those are the ways you could reach me.
Thank you, thank you. And we'll go ahead and put that back on our Minding Your Business Facebook page. We'll put that information there as well after the show. And so they just type Toucan View into Google. We don't have to go to Anchor or anything like that.
I'm not sure what they'll bring up with it. It might bring up articles, but if you type TWOCANVIEW, it will either bring up the blog or within Spotify or podcast in Apple. If you type it in, the name of the podcast is going to pop up.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. And thank you for all that very interesting information, because outside of doing Minding Your Business with Blaze Nation Media, I have no idea how you would have started a podcast otherwise. And this is my first endeavor into doing anything like this, with the goal of educating or filling that education gap, informational gap for our communities. But I appreciate you shedding a light on some of the issues in Belize. You tend to be very controversial, and I love that, because someone else said something about, if you're not controversial, then what's the whole point? What's the whole point of doing it, right? I mean, you're controversial in a way that you're not making it sensational. It's really just a controversy. And thank you so much for doing this. We'll probably have you back at some other point, because I want to hear how you've developed now that you have your fancy schmancy high-tech mic and
Right.
other equipment. I would like to keep us abreast of all the developments that you're making and the sponsorships, and if you decide to take different roads with your Toucan View of the politics and the realty and whatnot. We love to hear the businesses and their development. So at some point, we're going to have you back if you want to. And thank you so much for being on the show and letting our viewers in on your little secrets of how you got started. So my bottom line for today, guys, is make sure that you follow your passion. Following your passion and your purpose is very, very important. And make sure that Not only that, but you find a way to make it commercialized. You can turn it into a business. And when you do that, you have to make sure you do all your research. I say it all the time. Research what works best for you,
right.
and really put your work into it if this is something that you want to do, because success comes when you're minding your business.
The content on Mind in Your Business is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific legal advice. This show discusses general legal issues affecting business owners. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily that of the show. If you need assistance with your specific legal issue, please consult with a licensed attorney.